Welcome on into the Colorado Prep Show presented by Upswing. I'm the editor-in-chief of Colorado Prep's Dan Mohrmann. With me, as always, the editor-in-chief of Mile High Sports Magazine, Doug Ottewill. Doug, it's still unseasonably warm in Colorado. Doesn't feel like winter sports, but we're still very much in the throw of winter sports. So hoops, hockey, swimming, and some wrestling.
The headlines feel like winter sports.
The headlines feel like winter sports. That is definitely true. As we get into the mix of what we're of the really the depth of winter sport championships, you and I, offline, we keep talking about the next issue of Mile High Sports Magazine that we're going to be putting together, the annual high school rankings. What happens this winter season doesn't necessarily have an impact, but I'm excited to be able to dive into what happened last year, pick out those top programs, figure out who the top overall team is based on your formula, which does a fantastic job of leveling the playing field from the
science.
Yeah, from the small schools to the big schools. We're not always going to get a Cherry Creek or Valley Christian winner. Cheyenne Wells took it last year, so that's always going to be fun. But you can check out all the great content in every issue of Mile High Sports Magazine. I was telling a friend yesterday, we were watching the Nuggets game, and I had to let him know that Bruce Brown is a Cowboy. And Bruce is big horse fan and encouraged him to check out the latest issue. So
that's right.
Great.
It's all in Mile High Sports.
That's right. And of course, we're featured right here on the Mile High Sports YouTube channel. Lots of great content across the board. And I'm sure, it's little news and notes that I see as we're getting online. I'm sure at some point we will hear Cody Rourke's thoughts on brand new Broncos offensive coordinator Davis Webb and Logan Kilgore, the brother of Taylor Kilgore, a former sports reporter here in Colorado. She was the sports director down in Colorado Springs at KKTV, friend of mine. And then she moved up to the Denver area to do some stuff with, I don't want to get this wrong, but I want to say Fox 31 might have been her deal. But Taylor's good friend, and congratulations to her brother Logan as he kind of makes his way up in that Denver Broncos staff. But
pretty cool.
As we start every show, Dougie, we talk about what's on our upswing. And on mine, it was just what I said as we introed. It feels like every time we get into this part of the year and I'm building out the winter state championship coverage schedule for coloradopreps.com, I forget how much fun this time of year is. I mean, we start mid-February. As crazy as this, I don't want to say as crazy as this sounds. One of the things I never would have had on my bingo card getting into high school sports coverage is actually how much fun those championship days of state swimming can be. You understand each race has its implications, and it's loud, it's crazy with all those swim fans who are just passionate about their stuff. So you start there, you get into wrestling, you get into hockey, and then of course we'll cap it with all the basketball coverage from all across Colorado.
You have an iWatch, Dan?
Do I have what?
Do you have an iWatch?
An Apple Watch?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course I do.
When you get into state swimming, I bet the thing goes off nonstop telling you that this is an unsafe environment for your hearing.
That's probably I turn those settings off.
Yeah.
I tend to turn those settings off. I think one time I fell down the Manitou incline and my watch told me it looks like you've taken a fall, and it was like, well, yeah, well, thanks, Captain Obvious. And from then on out, my school gear today, because we try and rock some school gear. Camera doesn't have it, but got a solid quarter zip for my friends just down the road at Cheyenne Mountain. Big props to athletic director Chris Roberts for raiding that closet and always making sure I've got some fine Cheyenne Mountain gear. So, Doug, what's on your upswing?
I would like to make a suggestion that we have a shared P.O. box, because what I'm finding to be true on the show is that a certain somebody, one of the hosts, always winds up with the new gear that gets sent in, and the other host, I'm at the Nuggets game with my nephew last night, and he's saying, "Hey, will you wear the shirt I got you?" He's a Northfield guy on the next show, and I said, "Sure." Also, because I don't have any other options because you steal them all.
I don't steal them all. I'm a man. I'm out in the people.
Ever said, "Hey, Doug, we got a shirt in. Would you like it this week?" Maybe stealing's a bit aggressive, but I keep missing those texts, I guess.
That is definitely true. I tend to text you a picture of whatever new gear I got that I'll be wearing on the show. So
yeah, but they always say, look what we got. I mean, and we did. It's just that only one of us gets to wear it, I guess.
So what we need to do. We can kill a lot of birds with one stone, because at state football, I believe it was our friend Larry Bowl, the district athletic director at Cherry Creek, told us that he was going to make sure we were outfitted with everything from every Cherry Creek district school. So we got to follow up with Larry.
Larry lost my number, I guess, sometime, and then
I'll probably see Larry tomorrow at the Chassa Legislative Council meeting. So I'll drop that reminder in his ear of, hey, man, you said you were going to outfit.
Big bag for you.
Yeah. Hopefully the trunk of his car is loaded.
I'll stop complaining in the efforts of actually talking about high school sports, but you talk about the great time of year it is, and admittedly, being a former basketball player, I pay a lot of attention to a lot of basketball. Maybe not quite as much to state wrestling, but I was reading an article on coloradopreps.com that had the most recent wrestling rankings. And what kind of jumped out at me is Pomona High School, fresh off the 3A state title in football. They're sitting atop the rankings in wrestling, which isn't necessarily abnormal. They're always right there. But Pomona ranks number 1 in 5A wrestling. And they have 6 number 1 individual wrestlers. And that's basically half the weight classes. So if you're doing the math at home, I mean, Pomona is just rolling in the state of wrestling. One name jumped out to me, Emmett Munson. Mm-hmm. He's the top rated 165-pound wrestler. He was phenomenal in the state championship football game. Big reason that they were able to win that game. So I looked at that and thought, man, that's pretty cool. You got a state champion football player that's also, on pace to become a state champion wrestler as well. So props to him. And then, you look over, and what do you know? Pomona's right there at number 2 in girls wrestling. So, man, if they're rolling out the mats up there at Pomona High School, they're serious. So, props to the Panthers, and that's my upswing for the week.
Well, and to roll out those mats and to be that successful, you need some quality training, the kind of training that you can get at a place like Upswing. I mean, with experienced coaches and a safe, high-performance environment, Upswing helps young athletes discover their true potential, the kind of potential that can put a team like Pomona at the top of the state wrestling rankings. Once you're through with all that training, Doug, you can get into that recovery zone. I joked last week that I was up on that Manitou incline in 3 degrees a week ago yesterday in shorts. So all I could think about is that Upswing Recovery Center and that hot tub just sitting right there near the front door. Recovery at Upswing helps young athletes prevent injuries, bounce back faster, and keep progressing toward their dreams. Dreams like we're going to see in the next few weeks as state championships get claimed in several different sports. And of course, Upswing does its best to remove cost barriers. It invests in the drive and talent of young athletes, creating opportunities for them to excel in and out of the gym. You can check them out at 7460 South University Boulevard in Centennial and learn more from at their website at upswingfoundation.org. This is normally where we would bring in our friend Jermaine Stafford, but Jermaine texted me before the show. Our guy's got a lot going on. He was
a lot of assignments.
He does have a lot of assignments. It was on social, so I have no problem saying this. He was recently named the head track and field coach at Lutheran High School. So now we officially get to call him coach when he's on the show.
Is it a conflict of interest?
I think we can grandfather him in.
I think so. He was too good of an analyst to get caught up in details,
That's right. And you know what? What I do like is, people have probably figured this out. Like you and I, we have our preferences of sports that we really like to cover and that we're paying attention to more than others. I think one thing that Jermaine really does do for us is he kind of keeps us balanced in making sure that we're paying attention to things across the board. And I think he'll do a fantastic job with that in track, because he will let us know when his kids are performing well, and he'll let us know which kids they need to chase down.
Well, and, for people that know Jermaine, that he was a phenomenal multi-sport athlete. So he has a real experience and a real voice across the board with a lot of different sports. I mean, we know him as a football guy and a track guy. I mean, he's talking about basketball, reminding us, hey, I get to the rim. So, he's pretty well-rounded, probably well-rounded more well-rounded than either one of us.
That's definitely fair.
In
So,
in a lot of ways, really, personally,
yeah.
professionally, whatever.
Oh yeah, a good head on his shoulders. So hopefully we get Jermaine back next week. Hopefully get some rest between now and then, just to settle down from everything that's been going on. That being said, I did have a guest lined up, and then that guest texted me last night and said, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it today. So we're going to try and chase that. It was a basketball coach. We're going to try and chase that basketball coach down next week. So the majority of the show, Doug, or not the majority, the entirety of the show is going to be you and me talking high school sports, which is just going to do great things for, for
platforms.
That's right. I mean, so many likes and retweets and reposts and all that. But as we were looking through, last week was a crazy week just in the basketball world. We had so many top 10 matchups, and I think none bigger than the highly anticipated matchup in the Jeffco League between Ralston Valley and Arvada West. Big match, a lot of hype, turned into a little bit of a meh game as Arvada West got a 45-42 win. Caden Bricada from Ralston Valley had a three-pointer attempt at the buzzer to tie the game, but no good, off the back of the iron. They'll meet again in the regular season finale on February 21st. Right now, Arvada West sits at number 1 in the CHSA Selection and Seeding Index, which is just catches us off guard just based on what we've seen at the Coliseum the last few years. We're definitely not taking anything away from them. We like seeing this, but when you look at those blue blood teams that are always, at the grade 8, at the Final Four, when it's your Valor Christians, your Regis Jesuits, your Chaparrals, Mountain Vistas, all that, Arvada West hasn't been there. And so it's something really, really cool to see. Ralston Valley sitting at number 3. We talked about it last week. There's a lot of Centennial, City League, Continental League. But I asked you to look into this one, Doug. What's your big takeaway from this result over the weekend?
Well, I think, my biggest takeaway is that this is a game that really kind of left you wanting more. I mean, by all indications, both of these are really, really good teams. And when you see two good teams play each other, you want to see the things that they're known for, which, in this case, they're both high scoring teams. They both put a lot of points on the board. That wasn't the case in this game. 45-42 win for Arvada West. In my mind, it just doesn't quite tell the whole story. I think this, obviously these are league rivals, kind of backdoor brawl. There's some popular opinion that the officiating crew did not let them play. So it was a very, kind of slowed down version of what we've come to expect from both of these teams. So, I think my biggest takeaway is I can't wait for round 2, which happens here not too long, I believe in a couple weeks. So, I think when you look at kind of inside the numbers, A West averages 70 points a game. They scored 45 in a win. Ralston Valley averages just under that at 65. So, they were way far off of their average as well. Obviously, both teams are good defensively because they slowed each other down. But again, like I said, there was some talk of being a game that was greatly slowed down by a tight whistle, which sometimes that can happen in a league rivalry. You just get physical play, kids going all out, those kind of things. But, you look at Ralston Valley. You mentioned Caden Bricada. He's the state's top 3-point shooter, and he was kind of slowed down aside from just that last shot that gave him a chance to tie the game at the end. Arvada West, Keegan Balstreri, he's normally scoring 19 points a game, and he was held to 11. So, to some extent, the stars weren't shining as bright as they typically do in this game. So, like I said, these two teams may very well be, 1 and 2, 1 and 3, however the seeding index, they're right up there. They're really good teams, but I feel like we just didn't get a very conclusive result. And so I can't wait to see them play again and see if we see the two teams that we have kind of come to recognize a little bit more.
Yeah, and you're right. It happens I don't want to say very often, but every once in a while you'll just get that weird situation where a tight whistle, and I don't want to speak for any officials, but I'm wondering if it was they knew what the rivalry situation was. They knew if they let everyone go that it could be a game that gets a little too physical. And so maybe they just wanted to get control of it from the start, but that can also throw everything kind of out of whack. And I saw a game a couple weeks ago where it was similar to that. It wasn't a rivalry game, but there was a tight whistle. And I talked to one of the officials afterwards, and just kind of asked his thoughts on it because he was on that crew, and he said, when one guy is kind of calling it a certain way, it changes it can change the dynamic for other officials just because they're either trying to anticipate a call that's going to be made, or they'll see something and they're not sure if the other official is going to blow a whistle. So I'm hoping that in round 2 you get a little bit more. I mean, we'd love to see a 70-65 game in round 2 and see definitively who can play at their highest level and come away with that win. I see you also have a note here to keep an eye on Rangeview. I mean, the Raiders are rolling.
Yeah.
And
that's where I think, the indexing doesn't always tell the whole story, because Rangeview's only losses this year have come to out-of-state teams, and if I'm not mistaken, they were all in Las Vegas tournaments. So those teams, as people know, are really cream of the crop across the country. So Rangeview's yet to lose an in-state game that's meaningful. They haven't lost one at all. So it's hard to really kind of say, well, they're better than Arvada West, who's undefeated and beaten some really good teams. But you start to think about, well, what happens when those two teams go head to head. I mean, look, Rangeview beat Northfield, East, and GW in 3 out of their last 4 games. So they're beating people. They're beating real opponents. It's not just paper wins. So, I think this is, again, you said it right off the top. This is what we love about this time of year, because you do start to see how teams stack up against each other. And you do have those big question marks when teams that might not play each other until state continue to kind of climb. And that's what makes the drama of the Coliseum so great.
Well, yeah. And of course you have so many good situations when you get there. I mean, the Centennial League tournament we've talked about a little bit, just the entire Continental League schedule as a whole is always fun to watch. So it's games like these, and especially over the course of the next, it's going to be 2.5 weeks now until the regular season ends. So it's going to be really fun to watch. League championships are still very much in play for a lot of squads in those leagues, and I'm curious to see how that all plays out. It's not just in the Denver Metro that we're seeing really good basketball right now. We gave the Roaring Fork girls basketball team a lot of love a couple weeks ago, but the boys have actually dialed up very much. They beat a tough Aspen team over the weekend, and it was Lucas Carbalaria. I think that's how you say it. I apologize if it's not. He scored 12. Quentin Galbraith got 11. The Rams got an impressive victory over, and they're playing in 3A. They're a top 10 3A team. They beat an Aspen team that's I think they're number 6 in 4A right now. So non-league game
right now.
What's that?
They can't go skiing. They're just focused on basketball.
Yeah, that's what happens when there's no snow in the mountains. So
right.
you got to stay in the gym and get some shots up. But they both have a chance at their league championships. I mean, they can sweep out, their league schedules. But these are two teams that, Aspen we can see in the Coliseum because 4A will get there. 3A will be down at DU, but that's one where if Roaring Fork keeps playing, basketball at this level, I'm going to have to teach you how to be in charge of making sure the writers and everyone are staying on point at the Coliseum, so I can run down to DU and see what happens with Roaring Fork. So that was a good that was a fun result to see over the weekend. I talked to you about this one that I actually had the inkling to drive out to Simla because Simla and Byers number 1 and number 2 in 2A, and it was Simla getting a 69-63 win last week, and I was trying to pull some highlights from the NFHS network. We've done that a little bit so far in the show. I think it's a great way to show what some of these teams are doing. I got to give Simla head coach David Guy a little bit of grief the next time I see him because he's quick at getting that film off the NFHS network so that other teams just can't scout him. But all indications are this would be a fantastic title game if everyone got to see it again in mid-March up in Fort Collins. Tatum, I think it's Kosera. Some of these kids were just struggling with you and I are the writers, Doug. We need to know how to spell these names, not say them.
Could be Coachera.
What is it? Coachera?
Could be. Just
Could be.
throwing it out there.
It looks like it, right?
Either way, he's a scoring machine.
Yeah. He led the Cubs with 27 points. He's been so solid all year long. The key to this Simla team is that in the book, it was only sophomores and juniors who were scoring for them. So this is, and they're now that top team in 2A boys basketball. So this could be very a big indicator of what this Simla team can do over the next 2 years.
Well, Simla's traditionally just a very good sports program all around. I mean, they've got good history in girls volleyball, football, obviously. But you talk about a class coming through when you have a team that's made up of a lot of underclassmen and is playing at this level already. Like, that's pretty exciting, considering that these guys are going to be around for a while. So this is maybe this is the first of three kind of a thing down in Simla. But it's always interesting too when you have a younger team. How do they respond when you get deeper into the state tournament?
Yeah, and then experience is definitely a factor when you get into we call them regional tournaments, but those first 2 rounds of state where, they'll get to play at home, but you're going to get some quality teams and that you're going to get their best shot.
That gym is loud too. Speaking of loud places to watch sports,
it's on my list of places that I really want to check out. I keep meaning to actually map out my list of schools where I've been to or seen an event and all that. And I know it's over 100, but Simla is one.
Cubs fans are loud and they travel,
which is always what you want to see out of the small town teams. So, sticking with the Western Slope, and this is more. They've already played once, but big showdown this week. 5A, number 1 versus number 2, Palisade versus Grand Junction. Grand Junction won the first game on January 13th. Palisade's got to win this game tomorrow. Otherwise, I think their league championship hopes are gone. I know Fruta Monument has 1 loss. Grand Junction has 1 loss. So it could turn into a two-horse race. And these are 2 teams that we've talked about all year. And we keep having that same question of, like, is this for real, or are these teams, kind of genuine in what the results are showing? And I think it's time we just kind of give them their flowers. I think that there's a good chance we see both these teams in Denver.
Well, Jermaine made a point a couple of weeks ago. You start to look at these teams on the Western Slope, and they're popping up in every sport and performing well in every sport. Palisade, Grand Junction, obviously sitting there at the top in 5A hoops. But even if you think about Montrose, that's a team. There's just athletes out there, and I think they're very focused on that. And Jermaine made a good point about that. But this game, I agree with you. This is the game to watch this week.
Yeah. We're going to shift over to girls basketball. Going through again, we had so many quality matchups in the last week. Denver East took on Northfield. It was a 20-point edge in the first quarter that made the difference for the Angels. They sit in the driver's seat now for that girls' City League title. Marriott Hardy leads the way for the Angels, averaging about 15 points per game. They didn't have the stats uploaded from that win over Northfield, but I know you're wearing the Nighthawks gear, and that's a program that has very much been on the rise in a lot of different ways. But East,
their girls teams have been excellent for several years now.
Yeah, but right now it's still that Denver East team that figures to own that City League. Carl Maddie, longtime coach at Regis Jesuit, has done a fantastic job since moving over.
We did a story on Carl Maddie. I should actually say Neil Devlin did a really good story on Carl when he decided to take the job. And I remember going over there for the photos, and I want to say this was probably, what has he been on the job? 4 years now? 4 seasons? Something like that. And it was, coming from the success that he had at Regis, which was a powerhouse. And you have a flood of girls that play club basketball coming through, playing all the summer programs. His first year at Denver East was literally, okay, let me learn your name. Let me learn your name. Who's played here before? Is this your first time going out for basketball? It was a program at the the bottom of the heap, it just it didn't have the tradition or the talent per se that Regis did. So what he's done in relatively short order at Denver East is really, really impressive. And it's, obviously, as you just mentioned, starting to show up on the scoreboard.
Yep. And so East is a team that we'll be tracking very much so over the next 2 weeks as the 6A, 5A regular season nears its end. Simla, we're going to go back out to Simla and Marino, number 1 versus number 2 girls. We had the boys taking on number 2 Byers. The girls, the Simla girls are still ranked number 2 in that selection seeding index that you mentioned earlier, but which is always peculiar when you see that, they got the Simla got a 55-47 win over Marino. Marino, of course, I believe they're the defending state champion from last year. And they're the number 1 team. I use quotation fingers, but that similar group of Carly Cox, Kinley Cox, and Katie Gottschall, they each scored 14 points in that win. And if you want to know what those girls are capable of, just look at our volleyball coverage from last year. Those were the same girls kind of leading that charge for the volleyball team that won its first state championship in a while. So
yeah, and obviously there's a teamwork component to that too. But I think it's funny when you start to look at head-to-head matchups versus the seeding index. The seeding index gives everybody a lot of bulletin board material. You don't think those girls know that going into that game, and that means a lot to say, hey, we're going to show the computers otherwise. And so yeah, this is another great matchup this week.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see how that league also plays out over the course of the next few weeks going into that 2A state tournament. 5A top 10 showdown as Lutheran got the better of Air Academy, 52-45. I think the big takeaway from Air Academy right now, and we saw them with Coliseum last year. They looked so good, so polished. Just ran into that buzzsaw of a Mullen team. They got 24 points from Kinley Asp, their team leader, who I also think set school record for points in a game in their win over Coronado over the weekend. But they got 24 points from Kinley Asp against Lutheran, but they got just 21 points from everywhere else. Not the case with Lutheran. Isla Kaufman, Gia Genovese, and Berkeley Schneider all scored in double figures. It was more of a team effort. Lutheran's kind of taken, I think they're trying to take control of that PPAC. They're number 1 in the girls 5A selection seeding index. But I don't want to put too much on Air Academy, but more of a theoretical question for you, Doug, is what can happen? What's a team's fate going to be when you're relying that heavily on one scorer and you're not getting the help around her that you're used to from even just a year ago?
Well, I think the funny thing about basketball is that in an odd way that can work. You think of some of the great teams in Colorado State history that have, a great scorer. I mean, you look at Valor Christian last year. Cole Shearer carried that team, and he just was unstoppable. So I think what it often takes is for one other person to step up, or you win a game on defense if the other team figures out how to double team your star. But I remember watching Kinley Asp last year at the Coliseum, and definitely a scorer. Whether it's girls or boys, if you can score, you can score. And I think that in the sport of basketball, sometimes that's all you need. And it takes a great coach to figure out, okay, we got one person that can really fill it up. How are we going to get the most and the best out of the other 4 pieces? Call it 7, 8 when you include the bench. And a lot of times that's with defense. A lot of times that's with, trying to get the ball in the hands of your big guys, whatever the case may be. But Kinley can play, and she can carry that team. And she has experience at the Coliseum, which I think is always pretty vital. You might try to stop someone, and they might be better, but then you might have someone who just doesn't perform well at the Coliseum because it's in a completely different venue. She's not going to have that problem. So I still have some faith that she can take Air Academy and do some things, even if she's not getting the contribution, the contributors around her. But you never know. You have people step up a lot of times in state tournaments too. So it only takes one, really. It only takes one person to kind of pitch in and pick up the slack.
And another thing she does have is a state championship winning coach in Phil Royko. And Phil, he's a really, really smart basketball coach. And so I think getting into that environment, he'll do what he needs to do to put his players in the best possible position to succeed that he can. So
I really do think that the experience, especially experience at the Coliseum, it means a lot. You can take a team that might be a better team at their home gym and put them at the Coliseum, and all of a sudden it's a very neutral site. And I think that comes into play. So if you've had success there, if you've coached there, if you've shot the ball there, all those things matter when you get down to who's playing in Denver here in a month or so.
That's right. From the girls' landscape, we've got a key game to watch this week. Yuma and Wiggins face off. They're both in the 3A top 10, and Friday could pretty much turn out to be the 3A Patriot League championship game as they square off. So that's going to have major implications, of course, moving forward. The 4A, 3A, 2A, 1A regular seasons all end on February 28th, but that's a game that will have a significant impact even well ahead of that. So we mentioned the Coliseum a few times. I want to get into a little bit of buy or sell because I want to look at teams outside of that top 8 and see whether you think they can play their way in. If we're going to go by what the seeds are going to be, where the selection seeding index is right now, I want to know who's got the best shot to kind of upset their way in. So we've got some quick news and notes regarding wrestling, regarding hockey, and then we're going to play some buy or sell. This is the Colorado Prep Show presented by Upswing, and we'll be back right after this.
Yo, I can go all pro in these.
I can guard you and route you up.
You sure about that?
You fellas looking for a quarterback?
The goal!
You're right, Billy. These do bring out my eyes.
Every shoe for every athlete.
Dix is the GOAT.
The Benefits Broker team of agents has over 100 years in employee benefits and individual health care needs and is your 24/7 resource for a variety of essential benefits-related information. Clients have enjoyed the ability to connect in person or by phone, while others enjoy the convenience of their online service where they can review the status of their claims, obtain summaries, and download forms including claim forms. Dave and Steve do their homework so you don't have to. They know the market by distinguishing the best products from the merely adequate. Give them a call at 877-545-4840 or visit them online at benefitsbroker.com.
There are those who say the modern world has made us lose touch with places like this. We say, that depends on what you're driving.
Welcome back into the Colorado Prep Show presented by Upswing. Dan Mohrmann, the editor-in-chief of Colorado Preps. Doug Ottewill, the editor-in-chief of Mile High Sports Magazine. We're getting closer and closer to winter state championship season. Just want to touch on a couple of news and notes. We haven't talked about too much wrestling. We did, of course, at the top of the show because you wanted to highlight that Pomona is just doing the work they need to do on the mat as we get to that crucial time of the year. But regionals are just over a week away. And I just think it's appropriate to highlight a lot of those top wrestlers that are very likely to make their way through regionals and that we're going to see at Ball Arena. So I went through and just looked at overall records. And the thing that I wanted to know is who's wrestled a lot and who's lost a little. And I found 6 boys wrestlers who have wrestled at least 20 matches so far this year, and they still have a big goose egg sitting next to their name in terms of losses. So Zach Benson, 144 pounder out of Gunnison. I think he led all boys with a 38-0 record. Sam Stockton, 285 pounder out of Res Christian. Michael Saba, 150 pounder out of Air Academy. Anthony Estrada, 215 pounder out of Burlington. Richie Bruno, who does a lot of work on the football field and has just been a monster for that school. He's at 190 pounds out of Brush, and Elias Kuntz, 175 pounds out of Canyon City. The big takeaway there, Doug, is that it's all, middleweights and more heavyweight guys. You don't see a lot of those lightweights who are sitting undefeated right now, at least not having wrestled that many matches.
Yeah, well, I think that the math just works out. There's a whole lot more kids that don't weigh that much, and so the competition is just that much deeper. You know what that list signifies to me, though.
Huh.
That's a list of people that every basketball player in the state should never try to pick a fight with. They'll lose. It's just every basketball player knows you don't mess with wrestlers. You just don't do it.
It's usually I like to at state wrestling there is a security guy who's kind of like the media accountability guy, and any media friend of ours who's listening to this knows who I'm talking about. But every year I walk in and his name's Ray. I always look at Ray and say, "Hey man, just remember, if a fight breaks out, I'm on your team. Like, don't hit me because you and I are on the same team. I don't know what the fight's about, but you and I are on the same side." And I think if
that's
you're
a list of people that are my friends all of a sudden. There you go.
Yeah. So if you're a basketball player at one of those schools, those guys are on your team. Doesn't matter what the fight's about.
That's right.
We actually have 7 girls who are at that mark of 20 wins of 20 matches or more with 0 losses behind their name. Jaden Cuevas, 115-pounder out of Prairie View. Vivian Gitke, 140-pounder out of Strasburg. Shiley Tuzon, 190-pounder out of Grand Junction Central. Amelia Bacon, 125-pounder out of Vista Peak. Shayla Martinez, 190-pounder out of Broomfield. Ryan Hickey, 145-pounder out of Chatfield. Of course, the Chargers have been a very solid girls wrestling program since the sport was sanctioned back in 2020. And Lakin Backstrom, 190-pounder out of Pagosa Springs. So those are the wrestlers that we're really going to keep our eye on. I think the 2 stories that we love, that I love looking at going into state wrestling, are potential 4-timers, because it seems like you're going to have at least one every year. This year, the only one that would be on track is Pomona's Timberly Martinez. It would be the first time that only a girl has been, gets the standing ovation at Ball Arena if she can complete her run for her 4th title. And then the other ones I like to look for are who can go through a season undefeated. That's a hard task to get through a wrestling season undefeated. So,
no doubt.
Shift over to hockey. The regular season ends in just over a week. We do have some bubble battles going on just in terms of the playoff bracket. Kent Denver and Glenwood Springs are kind of battling for that last spot on the 4A bracket. 5A, it's Castleview and Resurrection Christian in the mix for the 12 seed. One thing I think I want to reinforce with Legislative Council being tomorrow is there is agenda ADM 9, the administrative proposal to cap postseason playoff fields to 50% of the classification. Right now, 5A has 19 teams, I believe, 16 teams, and 12 make the state tournament. And Castleview and Res Christian have a combined record of 5-23. And it's just, this is me saying I hope ADM passes and hockey is cut down to an 8-team tournament field. And if I had my way, it would be an 8-team tournament field that you compete in one weekend and you alternate it every year between CC and DU. And you just go Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and just let everyone have 3 days of just nonstop playoff hockey. I think it can be done. I would like to see that proposal go into the hockey committee report after the season. But
I think it's funny, when you talk about playoff fields, everybody thinks of the obvious. How many football teams are there? How many basketball teams are there? You start thinking about teams or sports like hockey and maybe even field hockey or lacrosse, and the dynamic is different as to what that impact will be if you cut down the state size.
Yeah, and I think there's good and bad in both. And we touched on it a little bit last week. I like the idea of having to work for the postseason. I think we've very much things have very much gotten to the way of like, well, if you want something, we're just going to give it to you because, why wouldn't we want more teams to experience this? And I get that argument at times, but I don't think it really fits with the core values of what high school athletics are supposed to be, at least in my mind. But we'll see. What I found really interesting, and I hadn't looked at hockey too much. There are 16 teams in 5A, and they have a 12-team bracket. There are 19 teams in 4A, and they do a 10-team bracket. So you have fewer teams in 5A, but more in the postseason. And that's one of those nonsensical. You just throw your hands up and look at the hockey committee and kind of ask, what are we doing here? Like, what are we really doing here? So
that's what I say to hockey parents, 2 a.m. when they got to get ice time. What are we doing here?
What are you doing? I mean, I can't really knock the 2 a.m. for ice time, because that's usually about the time that, I'm doing something stupid anyway, in a responsible way. All right. So I teased it a little bit, but I wanted to look at who's going to make it to the Coliseum from the standpoint of, we all know 4A, 5A, 6A, it's your grade 8. Grade 8 starts at the Coliseum, your state quarterfinals. In theory, it should be your top 8 seeds as they're outlined on the bracket. But I want to look at some of those teams that are reasonably outside the top 8. And just from what we've seen this year, I just want to know if you think, who you think has a chance of playing their way in. So we're going to start in 6A. We're going to go with number 10, Fruita Monument. And the theory here is really simple. I came up with the list, and Doug, I want you to tell me if you're buying or selling them as a Coliseum team. So we're going to start with the westernmost team in the state of Colorado, Fruita Monument. You buying or selling the Wildcats?
I'm buying, and it stems from what we talked about earlier with these teams on the western slope that just keep staying in the conversation, and you can't quite kick them out of the conversation. So I think that carries on to the Coliseum with Fruita Monument, specifically because of Jet Wells. I mean, we've talked about him several times on the show. Big time scorer, can score against any competition and has all year. And I think, we talked about that with on the girls' side, and Air Academy only having, Asp as their biggest scorer. I think Fruita Monument can go a long way on the back of Jet Wells. You got a star can carry you in the postseason.
And they got there a couple of years ago. They were the number 1 seed in the tournament, so it wasn't a shock to see them there. So I want to see what they can do as a 10 seed, where maybe those expectations aren't immediately placed on them. I think I can buy the Wildcats as a Coliseum team as well. Number 12, Eagle Crest, buying or selling the defending 6A champs?
I'm buying them as well, because they're the defending 6A champs. And we had Coach Kopshaw earlier in the season, and I just think that he's built a great program, and you have that, kind of, reload type of status at Eagle Crest. But not only that, but, specifically with coaching, if you just won one, you understand what you got to do it again. So I don't see them as a team that's going to be kept out unless they run into a real buzzsaw somewhere along the lines prior to the Coliseum. But I'm buying the Raptors for sure.
Cherry Creek Bruins. Are we buying or selling the number 13 team on the selection seeding index?
My notes on this one, I go back and forth. So what I actually have written down is that I'm holding, which is a great way to ride the fence. But they're just their results are so inconclusive. They've got some big wins over Eagle Crest, who I just said I was buying, and Valor Christian, who's always got a good program, and that's a big rivalry game. But then they've got big losses to Regis and Cherokee Trail. Good teams, but it doesn't show me that Cherry Creek is a consistent enough team at this point to ride all the way into the Coliseum. So I'm holding, because they can do it, but they just haven't shown me they can do it yet.
We head up to Fort Collins, Fossil Ridge SaberCats, buying or selling?
I'm selling Fossil Ridge this year. Traditionally a very good program, traditionally a lot of size. But I need to see the SaberCats beat somebody south of I-70. I think you look through their schedule, it's all teams from up north. And that doesn't mean there aren't some good teams, but, they haven't been down and playing those continental teams. They haven't played city teams. So I don't think there's a litmus test for exactly how good they are. And if they're sitting at number 15, that tells me they're going to run into some of that sooner than later. So I'm selling Fossil Ridge at this point.
What I find interesting is that you're selling Fossil Ridge for who they haven't beaten. They haven't beaten any team. What'd you say? South of I-70?
South of I-70.
But, you're buying Fruita Monument when...
Hey, South North is way different than West East. Just, that's where we're going to put it out there.
Fruita has losses to Columbine, Rock Canyon, and Chaparral. And I'm just...
But they played them. That's part of it, too. They've seen it.
All right. We're going to go down to 5A. Green Mountain, the last year's state runner-ups. You buying or selling the Rams?
I'm buying the Rams. I mean, they made it all the way to the state final last year, but more importantly, they've won 8 straight, so they're red hot, which I think matters when you're getting into March. They had a 3-game losing streak, kind of right there in the holidays, 1 before Christmas, 2 right after. If memory serves, that was about the time when every kid and every family I knew had somebody that was sick. I'm not saying that was 100% the case, but I think Green Mountain's a good team. I think their last 8 are more reflective than the 3 they lost right in that time. And look, hey, that's a very unscientific theory, but I'm kind of betting on recency here, and that's why I'm buying Green Mountain.
Lewis Palmer, buying or selling?
I'm selling Lewis Palmer. I mean, you're way more familiar with this, but they're another one of those teams. You kind of look at their schedule, and they're real inconsistent. They kind of have some nice wins, and then they'll go out and lose to some teams that might test them. And they've played some good teams too, and beaten some good teams, but they've also lost to some. So I don't know. You're definitely more well versed on that team, as I know you've seen them, but I'm selling them just for the inconsistency factor.
I think the only reason that I would buy at this point is they took Cheyenne Mountain to overtime, and Cheyenne Mountain has really turned out to be a very, very solid all around team this year. So if that game is one more bounce goes Lewis Palmer's way, they come away with that win. I think the loss to Palmer Ridge, and I talked to Palmer Ridge coach Nick Mayer the other night. That was a good win for his program, because in basketball that rivalry tends to go the way of Lewis Palmer. But I want to see how that one plays out in round 2. They'll get to face each other again in just over a week. So I want to see how that one goes. Number 11, Mesa Ridge. Final 4 team last year, 2-time state champion. Doug, you buying or selling?
I'm selling for now. I think, we're seeing life after the Real brothers, and those 2 guys. And, for anybody that watched state tournaments the last couple of years understands, exactly how good they were and how much they individually carried a team, which, I'm not saying that there weren't any other good players or that there wasn't a team effort, but those 2 brothers stood out and carried their teams. I was looking at their stats right now. Scoring is good, but they don't have a standout scorer. I think they have, 3 or 4 guys that are right around that 10-point mark. Not a bad thing, means your team's well-rounded. But I also like to see, as you get towards state, that you've got a go-to kid, someone that everybody on the floor knows, is kind of the guy that's going to get the ball on the picket fence play, and not, there's no question. It's that guy. And they've had that in the past. I'm not so sure they have it now, which is why I'm selling.
All right. We go down to number 13, Silver Creek. Buying or selling?
I'm buying. I think for the reason that I'm selling Mesa Ridge is the same reason I'm buying Silver Creek, because they do have one of those kids in Luke Schmeickel. I mean, not just a fun name to say, but a fun kid to watch. He's averaging 20 plus. So he is that kind of scorer, and he can carry a team. So I'm buying them. Not a team, not a name you're as familiar with in the Coliseum, but they do kind of have a star player, and I like some of their wins. So I'm buying with Silver Creek.
All right, so we're going to move down to 4A real quick. Eaton, buying or selling?
I'm buying. I mean, when it comes to Eaton, and I can't say that I, have a real good feel for the basketball team, but this school just wins. I mean, you name the sport, and they're right there. They have a culture of winning. So I'm going to go with buying for Eaton.
Coleridge, Coliseum team last year. You buying or selling?
I'm buying. I think that, we talked about it earlier in the show. You get experience in that building. And they were good last year. They were there. They had athletes. I believe they returned back quite a few kids from that team. So I'm buying them as well.
What I like about that Coleridge team is I think they still have some baseball players that helped lead that program to its first state baseball title. And I think once you get a taste of winning, no matter the sport, I think that's something that you're always going to work toward. And having that at Coliseum experience last year, I think is going to be a big help. University, you buying or selling?
I'm buying. They were there last year, right on the brink. They have some nice wins on their schedule. I'm not fully sold. They might even be in that kind of I'm holding category, but given their experience and given some of the wins on their schedule, I will buy University.
The Classical Academy.
Boy, that's a tough one. I am not sold. I'm selling. I can't give you a specific reason why. I just don't know that they have the signature win or the superstar player. They feel like a team that at least when you're looking on paper hasn't quite done that one thing that makes me a believer. So I'm selling, but like University, a little closer to a hold than a full sell.
Yeah, and I think the thing with the TCA is they're playing in a 5A league, which I think is always beneficial because you're playing teams that are consistently above your fighting weight. They have a 30-point loss to Eaton, which certainly gives you pause if you think Eaton can play their way in. I don't know if you're necessarily as enthused about a TCA, but I think we'll get a better sense in a couple weeks. They have a non-league game at Palmer Ridge. They host Pueblo South, and then they close the season with a game at home against Holy Family. So I think that would give you a much better sense. So it's always a fun experiment. I mean, we could revisit this in 2 weeks.
Incomplete for them.
Yeah, probably an incomplete. So it'll be, I think, as we get closer to the state tournament and when brackets are going to get it kind of figured out, we'll get a much better sense of these teams. But I just like the idea of doing this little check-in, and our basketball coach that we were supposed to have on today, forced me to come up with some fun stuff to talk about. So this is what we got. But legislative councils tomorrow. We're going to wrap it up, get to our standouts. We've got a little bit more to go. This is the Colorado Prep Show presented by UPSWING, and we'll be back right after this.
This is Tim Anderson of Gordon Insurance, and we are proud to support all of our area athletes. With offices in Lyman, Callahan, Flagler, Sterling, and Kit Carson, we offer all types of insurance, including home, auto, commercial, farm, crop, life, bonds, and workman's compensation. We are independent and thus can offer you multiple choices of companies, not just one. Call or visit the office near you, and one of our agents can take care of you. See all of our contact information by going to www.gordonins.com or call me at 719-740-1361.
Whoever said work smarter, not harder, didn't realize you could do both.
When I go to court, these aren't my clients, these are my friends. These are people that I believe in. And they have one shot, just one shot for justice. If they've come to me and we've gotten to trial, their life has been turned upside down in some awful way. And I am their only hope. I need to be their champion, to quote Prince Oberyn from Game of Thrones. They need someone in this trial by combat that can fight for them. I'm all they have. So if I haven't put the time in, if I haven't trained, if I haven't humbly looked in the mirror and thought about ways I can be better, and I don't present my best self in court, then I failed them. And that's what motivates me as a trial lawyer, because when this is over, that client goes home. And if I haven't done my best for him, I haven't been his champion, then I've failed.
Welcome back into the Colorado Prep Show presented by Upswing. Dan Mohrmann, Doug Ottewill, trying to wrap things up so it's not just, the two high school sports media. I don't want to call us dummies, but sometimes I feel like that's what we are. Just rambling on. Pretty impactful day in the high school sports landscape in Colorado tomorrow, as it's the first of 2 legislative council meetings. I went ahead and published what I think the Colorado Preps editorial recommendations would be on the entire legislative council agenda. You can find that at coloradopreps.com. But in going through that, there are a couple of things I want to point out. We've talked about playoff field sizes. We talked about that last week. A little bit more today when we touched on what's going on with hockey. But one thing that I found in going through this, and I don't keep up with all the committee report stuff as they come out, Doug, but when you're going through the legislative council agenda, you can't help it. First thing that really jumped out at me is that baseball wants to move to a little bit of a different playoff format, mainly in 3A, 4A, and 5A, where your first weekend is two true brackets that are double elimination. So you play out the first weekend with a winner from each bracket, and then the second weekend, I want to say it's weekend to weekend, but the second weekend would be a best 2 of 3 series to crown your state baseball champion. I can't get behind that enough. I can't throw any more support toward it than you would think. But what are your thoughts when you hear that?
I generally really like the idea of series in the sport of baseball. Obviously, that is the tradition of the sport itself. But I think, more importantly, when you're trying to think about who's the best team in the state, and it's the same thing whether you're talking Major League Baseball or College World Series or whatever, but you don't want the state champion to just be the best pitcher. And I think, to me, coming up with a format that allows the best 2 teams to work their way through, but then, you get it. You got to go 2 out of 3 to win. That just seems very baseball. And I'm in favor of that because, like I said, you want the best team to win. You don't want the best pitcher to win. One pitcher, one game for sure, and that's great, and that's a big part of your team. But I think especially in high school, I want to see a team's well-roundedness and see how good they are in a 3-game series.
Yeah, and I think that's naturally what we want in all sports situations, right? It's why having a week off between the conference championship games and the Super Bowl in football is so ideal. It's so that in theory you can get your teams as healthy as they can be, so you can figure out who the best team is. I like this just from the standpoint of the team that has 0 losses going into that second weekend it's such an advantage because of that pitching situation. Now, you can have a situation like 2 years ago, Mark Johnson's last year with Cherry Creek, where Cherry Creek was the team with the loss and then came back and beat Regis Jesuit twice in, what's a storybook ending. If this was, if this was somewhere in Texas, like they might make a Disney movie out of the way that Mark Johnson's career ended. But, it doesn't happen that often. And I think this will give us a true representation of who the best baseball team in the state is. Golf is another one. Golf is another one looking for a couple of significant changes. They're going to eliminate double par, and which has had an impact in terms of the I Wanamaker scoring and getting the 84 team field. They want to bring back a form of regionals, so they want to get, as the proposal is written right now, 42 qualifiers from the I Wanamaker rankings, and then have 4 regional tournaments to bring in the other 42 kids, as kind of a competitive way to play your way into state, which is, you talk about traditions rooted in baseball and series. That's also tradition rooted in golf, is play your way into the event. They want to bring back.
I know that you've pointed out some flaws with the I Wanamaker scoring system, and it's just like any other sport. There's no perfect way to crown your champ or to come up with your, the bottom half of your tournament bracket or whatever the sport may be. But I do think that this particular suggestion is kind of a way to do both. Maybe you're not so bogged down in the competition to get there that it, adds steps, adds facilities, it's solely dependent on one round. It's all of that. And I think that is a good suggestion. It makes it sort of the best of both worlds.
Yeah. And I think if I have one criticism of where golf is right now is that, especially with the way that the state tournaments were designed last year using strictly the I Want to Maker rankings, is there's really they're not picking a side in terms of either getting the state fields as representative of the state. And I say that because the 5A tournament didn't have a single player south of I-25 in Castle Pines or Plum Creek or wherever it was in Castle, wherever, that cutoff is in Castle Rock. Not a single player south of that qualified for 5A state. And I'll tell you, there are good players at Pine Creek, Rampart, Doherty, the likes of those. And that if you're taking 84 kids and not a single one of them qualified, you don't have a tournament that's representative of the state's geography. At the same time, you didn't have your best field of 84 because you have teams who qualify more than 4 players, but they get removed because you have a cap for a team. So I would like to see the membership go definitively one way or the other. We're either going to have representation from across the state, or we're just going to have the top, the best field that we can possibly have. I think that would be my one big criticism. As long as they're capping it at 4, the other change that's coming in the golf committee report is that teams will be able to choose their 4 players if they have more than 4 who qualify in that initial 84 team field. That did cause some issues last year. Teams,
but coaches don't want to have to do that.
Well, coaches want to take the kids that they feel either one gives them the best chance to perform at their best, or that have earned it. And
I think that's an easy criteria for sure. But you can imagine you have parents in other team sports, let's say football or basketball, or a little irritated because their kid doesn't start or doesn't quite get as many minutes. Can you imagine a golf coach who's got a really good golf team, who's 4, 5, and 6 are all really pretty close, and they got to pick one? I mean, that's a position I don't want to be in. It's great if you have 3 golfers that are probably good enough to play in the state level, but boy, that's a tough call to say, okay, coach, you pick them. That's really tough.
I think the best comparison I would make is if you had a basketball team and in the regular season you were allowed to suit 12 players, and then in the state tournament you were only allowed to suit 10, and you didn't get to choose which 2 were left off. Coaches and athletic directors do not like being told which kids they get to take to postseason events. So that's a very positive change. Girls soccer is looking to extend its season by a week, not necessarily like adding any games, but just shifting the calendar a week longer, which when it comes to spring sports, I'm all for, because everything is so condensed in that window that if we can give any sport some leeway, I think it's something that should be done. Golf extended a week a few years back. They went back to that period before Memorial Day, which I feel bad for CHSAA Assistant Commissioner Mike Book, because every time I see him, I remind him of how poor a decision that was. And, I have a feeling that he's getting sick and tired of hearing me complain. So who knows what he'll do, the actions he'll take to.
Hey, if we're trying to play the weather game, you could maybe see if you could pass a motion to take all spring sports and play them what would be the equivalent of December and January here in Colorado, because there would be 0 cancellations, including for golf.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm a big advocate, and the COVID year showed us we can do this. I'm a big advocate that spring sports should extend into June. Me
too. I mean, I really do think, if I'm a baseball player and I gotta, live out my high school days a couple weeks longer than when everybody else is, like, I don't think that's the worst thing, because you're getting to play in the best conditions. I kind of look at school in general anymore. It's such an odd experience compared to like when you and I were in school. I mean, there's late start days, there's, you know, midweek days off. There's, it's scheduling for school in general, whether you have online classes or late starts or whatever it might be. It's just not anything that's consistent. So I think moving some of those back to June when it's probably going to be nice weather, or nicer weather, it makes sense to me. But, you know, I'm also not a teacher or a coach who wants a summer vacation. So I get that part of it too.
Well, that's a longer conversation for another day. But I think Doug and I have yapped long enough. We're just going to send it out with our standouts letter winners for the week. I'll start it off with Deja Burns from Sierra Girls Basketball. She set the school record for career blocks at 363. She's been such a defensive force for that team. So congratulations to Deja on that school record. In the social media post I found, they made a point of saying that she's looking to add to that number this year, Doug, and games aren't over. So you figure she will.
I'm not sure I took that many shots, much less had, I mean, 363 blocks. That's incredible.
That's incredible. McKenna Swanson from Eagle Crest Girls Swimming. She took over the top spot in the 50-yard freestyle at 22.5 seconds. She is the first swimmer this season to break 23 seconds in the 50-yard freestyle. State swim meets begin next week at the VMAC in Thornton. So McKenna is one we'll be keeping an eye on.
Yep. When your hearing's about to be compromised.
Yeah. And I figured you would like the last one.
Yeah. I got a good one with Mason Bonner. I had the good fortune of being able to have lunch with Mason. The Mullen High School has, I believe it was called 0 week. It's kind of that stretch right between when you're on Christmas break and coming back off. And part of what they do is essentially do some job shadowing, some things that they're interested in, maybe in a potential college major or profession. And Mason had some interest in sports media. So good friend of ours, Tim Gelt, connected us, and we got to have lunch. And you know, obviously Mason was one of the football players we featured in our upswing spread and the football issue. But man, what a nice kid, tremendous athlete, huge athlete, just, you know, the kind that every coach wants to get their hands on. But he's averaging 29 points a game in hoops in his last 4 games, and Mullen's 3-1. So you talk about teams that are getting hot at the right time. Mullen kind of falls into the category. And Mason is a big reason why, you know, you're getting close to 30 points a game. You're getting after it. So shout out to Mason.
And shout out Tim Gelt for hooking that all up. Good experience for you, just as much for that kid. So that's going to do it for us at the Colorado Prep Show. Across the Mile High Sports Network, of course, we've got you covered for all things Colorado sports. For those wondering what's next for the Denver Broncos, as they do not have a football game upcoming this week, which still breaks our hearts. Well, one, they hired an offensive coordinator or promoted Davis Webb to offensive coordinator. So I'm sure Cody Rourke will have more on that at milehighsports.com. But check out Good Morning Broncos each day, because right now Cody is going through every single pending Broncos free agent and kind of giving his assessment of their season and his thoughts on whether or not they might come back and re-sign with the Broncos. So I'm curious to see how
not a long commitment. It's a few sips of coffee and you know.
Yeah, it's everything you need to know about. Today was Alex Singleton. Wouldn't we all love to see Alex Singleton back? Go enjoy Good Morning Broncos. Sip a cup of coffee with Cody Rourke as he gives you his thoughts. We saw it last night, not the result we wanted with the Nuggets either, but the Joker is back, which means life only gets more chaotic for Ryan Blackburn. His coverage at milehighsports.com. His Nuggets coverage is tops in the state. And tune in to Pickaxe and Roll on the YouTube channel right here as he chronicles the Nuggets push towards the playoffs, and hopefully they just get fully healthy. The NHL Olympic break is coming up. You would think that that's a break for us, but Colleen Flynn will be tracking all Avalanche players heading to Italy. Stay tuned for her coverage on Colorado Prep, or on not ColoradoPreps.com, but on milehighsports.com. And once they're back and once the Avs are ready to make their push for the Stanley Cup, she'll have everything covered there. We'll be back next week. Winter sports championship season will be officially beginning as we start with state swimming, but we're just going to continue this push, and we're getting into the fun times, Doug. So
maybe we can get Spain back for the people, you know,
That's what
my texts are blowing up. It's like, where's Jermaine? I tuned in. Where's Jermaine? You know, I don't know what to tell you. He'll be back next week. Let's hope.
That's what we're all hoping for. So for Doug Ottewill, for Danny Bailey, I'm Dan Mohrmann. Thanks for tuning in. This has been the Colorado Prep Show presented by Upswing.